It's very nice to have with us today Harvey Newquist, who has graciously agreed to do an oral history for the Computer History Museum. Thank you very much, Harvey.
Thank you. It's my honor.
For making the time. I think I would like to do this in more or less chronological order. Go through your career. So where I need to start is where you were born and brought up, and a little bit about the family you were born into, and any siblings you have, what your parents did, that sort of thing.
Okay. I was born in Racine, Wisconsin, in 1932. I was the fourth of 5 sons of Harvey Newquist and Mabel Hartman. In 1940, we moved to DeKalb, Illinois, where my dad managed a foundry right next to the Wurlitzer plant. My dad had been in the foundry business, and this was an opportunity for him to run his own business. Shortly thereafter, the World War II broke out.
Mm-hmm.
My 3 older brothers served in World War II. My dad was general manager of the largest manufacturing plant in that city of DeKalb ever. They made links for Sherman tanks, and they had huge electric furnaces doing steel links for treads for the tanks. And of course, the Sherman tanks were very instrumental in winning World War II.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first experience to manufacturing. I'd stop there after school and see him and wait for him, and he'd take me home. And it was really an unbelievable situation. So then I went to the University of Notre Dame.
Okay.
I pursued a mechanical engineering degree because I was influenced by the fact my dad had a metallurgical engineer as a consultant in his foundry.
Okay.
After World War II ended,
yeah,
my dad found himself out of a job. They closed the plant immediately. He was 50 years old and out of a job, and he started his own foundry.
Okay.
The Newquist Foundry in DeKalb.
Okay.
And I worked there summers. And at Notre Dame, the mechanical engineering degree, the design aspects didn't appeal to me too much, but they were starting a new industrial option, which ended up being the first industrial engineering degrees at Notre Dame. So I was a beneficiary of that.
Okay.
Summer before I graduated, I worked for GE as an intern in Schenectady, New York.
Okay. Now, can I just, sorry. I'd like to roll back and get a little bit more color about about your early family and your early education. When you went to school, what were the subjects that, in elementary and high school that you enjoyed the most?
Well, I was a pretty good student. I really enjoyed them all.
Okay.
But in high school, I enjoyed journalism. And I thought I would take a career in journalism.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't last that long. And I had the beneficiary of being the student body president and involved in a lot of organizations and curriculums, and became a pretty good athlete in track.
Okay.
And so I was offered a track scholarship to several colleges, but my mother and I certainly wanted me to go to an academic institution. That's why I went to Notre Dame.
Okay, what were the other colleges that you?
Drake University,
Okay.
Northern Illinois University,
Mm-hmm.
and a few others.
Okay. Were you a runner or
I was a hurdler.
You were a hurdler?
Yeah, a high hurdlist. And so I set a high school record that lasted 25 years.
Wow.
But I gave up that pursuit when I went to Notre Dame, and didn't even think about being in track at that time.
Didn't even go out for the track team?
Well, my freshman year, they had a brand new coach. He asked the freshmen to try out for track, and I said, well, I'd try again. So I went out. Not only did I make the team, but I ended up being the anchor man on a hurdle relay team.
Okay.
And set all Notre Dame's indoor records. One of them was only a tenth of a second off the world record. 3 of the records I set still stand today.
Oh my goodness.
And I earned a walk-on scholarship, so it paid for my education the second half of my career.
Wow. So you did do some This is at Notre Dame.
No, yes, at Notre Dame. That's
Yeah,
correct.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you did do track at Notre Dame.
Oh,
You
yeah.
didn't
Yeah, I
totally
did.
drop it, yeah.
No, that's exactly right. I just decided I'd give it a try again.
Yeah, okay. So what made you decide that you were interested in journalism in high school? What made you decide that maybe you wanted to do be a mechanical engineer?
It was an exposure to my dad's foundry and the manufacturing aspects of it that I liked. I liked the business of seeing a factory layout, seeing the work that he did, the products he made. He made gray iron castings at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that appealed to me. And when I went to Notre Dame, that really solidified my interested in
Okay, so when you started to take some mechanical engineering,
At Notre Dame, I took mechanical engineering.
yeah, and that resonated with you a little bit?
A little bit, but I was more interested in the industrial option of it rather than the design.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
And so I did things like factory layout and management practices for manufacturing.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So did you take any other sciences or anything like that in high school? In college,
No, it was strictly a straight
It
ME
was a
course.
straight
Yeah, ME.
engineering.
Yeah, exactly.
Straight engineering. All right. And so when you graduated, talk to me about what you thought you might want to do or where you might want to start out.
Well, when I graduated from Notre Dame, the Korean War had just ended several years previous, but the draft was still in existence, so I knew I was going to serve military service in the Army.
Okay.
And so I took a job with GE. I'd worked there in the previous summer before I graduated in Schenectady in our test engineering program in large steam turbine generators.
Okay.
And when I got out of school, I worked in 2 assignments in Erie, Pennsylvania, and again in Schenectady, and then I was drafted and went into the Army.
Okay.
And when I got in the Army, after basic training, they give you an aptitude test, and I did pretty well on that. And so I chose electronics school at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, in computers and radar.
Oh, okay.
And while I was there, I noticed that they also had a poster on the wall in the gymnasium that said people who had fairly good college track records could try out for the Olympics. And so I said, well, let me give it a try. So with no coach or anything else, I ended up making and representing the U.S. Army in the 1956 Army team for the U.S. Olympic trials in Los Angeles.
Wow.
I didn't make the Olympics, but it was a lot of fun competing with guys who did.
Yes.
And got quite far on that. Went right from there back to being assigned to Fort Story, Virginia, working as a field engineer on the Nike missile sites around Norfolk, Virginia. Radar computers.
Yeah. Now, had you gotten some more electronics training?
I'd gotten 6 months at Fort Monmouth.
6 months.
6 months there, yeah. And that was my first introduction really to computers, because at Notre Dame, slide rules were the rule. There were no computers in those days.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Sure,
yeah,
I'm an old guy.
Hey, yeah, this is the 50s.
You bet. So,
early 50s.
so I did that, and then GE asked me to join them. GE was very good about keeping track of their people who had worked for them and were drafted with the military. And so I had an opportunity to work in several GE plants, but I decided to work in Light Military Electronics Division in Utica, New York. And I started there in 1957.
Okay.
I had met my to-be wife, Pat Starr, when I was an intern at GE the previous 3 years previous to that. So we got married just about a month after I started with GE in Utica. Worked on 2 significant projects, but all of them based on quality control. At that time, Armand, I forget his name, but he was a quality control genius at GE. He headed up their manufacturing operation, Feigenbaum, Armand Feigenbaum. he emphasized quality at all levels of the organization. So I
All
was in
right.
quality.
He was very early.
Yeah, he really
in
was.
in the quality revolution. That didn't really start till the 60s.
Exactly. And so I got exposed to all of his programs. In addition, close associates of mine were members of the manufacturing training program. The manufacturing training program at GE had been developed by GE after World War II to compete against Westinghouse because they found out that although they were good in engineering and R&D, they really didn't have a good management group in their manufacturing operations.
Okay.
So they set up a 3-year program, six months assignments all around their facilities, where people would go and take not only an active role, usually above what they were merited, but go to school at night and almost like a master's class at night.
Wow. Okay.
Although I didn't get on that track where I was moving around every 6 months, I did study all their manuals, work side by side with them, and became very closely associated with the program.
Okay.
So between quality control and manufacturing management, I was regarded as a GE trained manager pretty well. So I worked there on 2 projects. One was a Sidewinder missile,
Okay.
and the other one was a project called the Hawkeye. The Hawkeye is an early warning system that's carrier-based. We brought it from prototype into production, and it still is in the fleet. It's been upgraded, but still in the fleet.
Okay.
And that was a real good experience in terms of computers, but we were still using vacuum tube computers in those days.
Wow.
Okay.
There were vacuum tubes in the missile?
Yeah. No, not in the missile, in the early warning system in the airplane.
Ah, okay, yes. Okay.
So, and they were just starting to get to transistors, but they weren't there yet.
Yes.
The development had not caught with that. So after a while, I decided I wanted to look around and see what was next on the list for me. I had kind of an entrepreneurial itch.
Yeah. Now, how long had you been there when
7
you got
years
this?
at GE in Utica.
Oh, 7 years.
Yeah,
All right.
57 to 64.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's quite a long time.
Well, I
yeah.
did, and I moved up the ranks to get some pretty prominent management positions there at an early age.
Okay.
Just because it was accelerated programs, those Defense Department programs were all accelerated, and you worked a lot of hours, but if you were good or had good people to work with, you were promoted very rapidly.
Okay, so talk to me about a little bit of sort of the steps you went through at GE to.
Okay, so I started out as just a basic industrial engineer and test engineer on the Sidewinder program.
Mm-hmm.
Got promoted to a supervisor of engineering on a program that built anti-sub warfare gear,
Mm-hmm.
and then was promoted to the senior position of this Hawkeye program
Okay.
that was given very high propriety in the division.
Okay.
And got a lot of experience there. Grumman was our partner on this. They built the aircraft, we built the innards, the computers, and the radar,
Okay.
and ended up probably managing over 100 people in their quality control organization.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
One of my friends in the manufacturing training program was a guy named Bob Grip.
Oh yes. Now I'm detecting connections.
There you go. So, and Bob Grip said to me one day, look, I think I'm going to leave this defense business and get into commercial computers, or at least more into computer business. And I said, Bob, what do you know about computers? Your background's accounting, and you've been in this electronic stuff. But he said, Harv, it's just ones and zeros. He said, but there's this company in Framingham, Massachusetts, that wants me to do their materials work, and they're hiring GE-trained manufacturing training program guys. They wanted strong manufacturing because they were more of an R&D operation, and they didn't have a good manufacturing base, and they were getting ready to expand.
Okay.
They had a manufacturing training program guy named Ken Hammer, who ran the Peterborough plant where they made modules for computer control.
Okay.
So the 3 of us made a group of GE-trained manufacturing managers for computer control.
I didn't realize that Ken Hammer was a GE.
Oh yes, he was there before Bob
Yeah.
and I went. So I handled quality control, Ken did the production in Peterborough, and Bob did materials.
Okay.
And we got there, and ones and zeros turned out not to be the only thing they did. From a quality control standpoint, the first problem I had is they told me, we got a problem on the line making a module for the Navy. And I said, what is it? They said, well, it's a magnostrictive delay line module, which was more than just ones and zeros.
Yeah.
They were fun to make, but we solved some problems. Once I got with Ed Hampson, who was a manufacturing guy at Computer Control, came to Utica, interviewed me. I went out, flew out, was very pleased with what I saw. He was pleased with what I saw and what he saw. And so my wife and I decided, well, we would take a fly and leave Utica with 5 children and 1 on the way.
Oh my goodness.
I'd already, which told people I'd already earned my production credentials pretty good, right? So we left there and went to Framingham.
Okay.
And started out what turned out to be a 4-year stint at Framingham. And the 4 years is important because I'll mention it again later. But when I was talking to Hampson, he told me, if you want to be an entrepreneur or you want to get with startups, there's some basic things that you can count on. If you stay in the mainstream with a company that's really on the edge and starting to go in the industry, your chances of success with it may be 1 in 3. And it takes almost 5 years for you to find out whether it's success given the SEC and the IRS and whether you really you really made a good decision, financial independence. So I said to my wife, well, let's give this a shot. So we went there. I loved 3C. That's where I met you. Met a lot of great people.
Okay.
I worked with you on the DDP-116, which was the first 16-bit minicomputer. Took the world by storm. You and I both received Paul Revere silver bowls.
Right.
Only 4 people in the whole company got them for excellence on running that program.
Yeah.
Still have pictures of you and I smiling at a luncheon.
Okay.
And then moved from that into running almost all the quality control for 3Cs and some production. Well, Honeywell, while I was running the quality control and production for the DDP 516 line,
Yeah. Okay.
which was the first integrated circuit computer,
Right.
Honeywell decided their process computer division wasn't really responding to the market. So they decided not only to buy 3Cs in 1966, but to close their Port Washington plant, and move all their manufacturing senior guys to Framingham. And so my job not only was to now run the Honeywell line, the 16 line for Honeywell, but to train and indoctrinate in my philosophy on manufacturing the Honeywell guys.
Okay.
Did that for 2 years.
Yeah. Who were some of the people that moved up in manufacturing? I mean, I know a couple of them in engineering.
Yeah, well, there weren't too many in manufacturing, 1 or 2, and I actually can't remember their names.
Okay.
But they were guys who were willing to move. Many people weren't willing to move from Pennsylvania to Old Connecticut Path.
Yes.
So,
right.
so we turned out that we had a very productive 516 line. We started to increase production, several units a day. People weren't doing that in those days. And not only was it increasing in volume, but it maintained the quality that I wanted, which was my first priority.
Right.
And so with the Honeywell acquisition, that said, well, my 5-year term is almost up, and now it's a big company. I was offered the total manufacturing job for Honeywell division.
For the computer control division?
Computer control division, and I turned it down because it just wasn't what I wanted to do at that time. I wanted a little more challenge in something more of a startup.
Yeah, where there were more problems to clear, things, just to grow it.
And create with a new technology, not being tied with Honeywell's theory of what their process control division needed, rather than moving forward. And at the time, as we had at Computer Control, in the basement we had an integrated circuit lab being developed.
Exactly.
By Colin Knight, and I had witnessed GE's tries at trying to do that. They weren't very successful. Colin Knight was very successful.
And You know, the basic 3 transistor cell dynamic RAM came out of that operation.
You bet. And
Intel decided they'd go build it for us, and it turned into the 1103, which was the first really successful.
it was.
Semiconductor memory. So so there was a lot of innovative stuff going
Very
on there.
innovative, you know, and we had transitioned from building mission simulator computers for the Apollo program
Yeah.
to being now a commercial computer operation,
Yeah.
and looking at quality and volume.
Yeah, when you look at volume, then quality follows right.
Well, no,
better lead it.
Well, quality leads it. Yeah, if it's not good quality, don't bother shipping it, because
Yeah.
if you can't ship it, you won't make your costs.
Yeah.
So it's that priority. So I'm pretty well established on that, and so one day I got a call from a friend of mine who worked at Digital Equipment.
Oh,
His
okay.
name was Alan Clutchman.
Oh, yes, of course.
And
I
Alan
remember.
had worked at 3Cs before he went to Digital Equipment. I
Right.
knew him at 3Cs.
Yes.
And he said, there's a new startup company taking place, and they'd like to talk to you. It's brand new.
Okay.
And I said, okay, now's the look at the next 5-year stint, maybe the last.
What's the next 5-year plan?
Well, yeah, because, you know, if you've got 3 chances, most people don't start it before they're 30, and most people won't start it after they're 45. So this would have been probably my last good shot at it. I was just 35 years old.
Okay.
And so I said, okay, I'll meet them. And I went to the Framingham Motor Inn after hours,
Yeah.
walked into the lounge, sitting in a corner booth, very dark area, were 3 engineers I never heard of. Ed DeCastro, Henry Burkhardt, and Dick Sogi.
Okay.
They said, we're from DEC. We've just formed a new company in April. This was in May.
Okay.
And they said, we're looking for a manufacturing guy. And I said, okay, and I'm a manufacturing guy, and I'm looking for an opportunity. We went from the Framingham Motor Inn to a beauty parlor in Hudson that night, drove the 20 miles, walked in, and there on the table was the Nova computer,
Okay.
prototype.
Yep. Wow.
That's what I said.
Wow.
I had never seen anything like it. When we were at 3C, I was on part of a product planning team that worked with marketing. We were thinking about doing something with more medium scale integration things, especially from Fairchild. But didn't want to impact the existing lines, and Honeywell wasn't interested really in it at all.
Yeah.
But I was, and I looked at it, and it was a beauty.
Mm-hmm.
Not only was I impressed with its design, but I knew it was a game winner. And I knew I could produce the hell out of it.
Yep.
But I didn't know these guys. They were all younger than I was. Burkhardt was 12 years younger. He was 24 and I was 36.
Okay.
And I didn't know of DeCastro's role in the PDP-8 or Sogi at all. I knew he had done memory work. So they said, well, we'd like you to join us after a discussion.
Yeah.
And I said, no. And they said, why not? And I said, well, I've got a stock option with Honeywell that vests in September. And you don't really need a manufacturing guy right now based on where you are. Just having this prototype and planning to announce it in December later on in the year, you don't really need me and save your money. So I want to finish my role at 3C, and if you're still interested, come back.
Okay.
So they said, okay. So I did some research and I found out 2 things.
Yeah.
One was the leader of their new company and the manufacturing guy, and a guy named Pat Green at Digital Equipment, who was DeCastro's boss,
Right.
had put together their business plan. And at the last minute, he and his wife decided it was too risky, and he decided to bow out of it after he raised the initial funding. The initial funding was $800,000, $400,000 up front, $400,000 after they got a manufacturing operation underway and got some orders.
Okay. Yes.
And so he was going to be their president and a manufacturing guy. And they went out without him.
Yeah.
Second thing I found out was the major investor was George Kogar.
Okay.
And George Kogar I knew of from work a long time previously when he had set up Mohawk Data Sciences. And he and I had worked together just in Utica, just down the street from each other. We didn't really know each other, but our experiences were in the same place.
Okay, really?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
So they contacted me in September and said, "Are you ready to talk about joining us? We still haven't hired a guy." And I said, "I want to talk to George Kogar."
Okay.
And they said, "Okay, well, you also ought to talk to Fred Adler, who was the Wall Street lawyer who had also participated in funding." So one day on early morning, I flew out of Logan with the three of them. We went down to Adler's office in Ravison McGrath in Manhattan,
Yeah.
talked to him. He didn't know a damn thing about manufacturing. This was his first venture capital operation. He'd put in a few bucks, but most of his friends in Wall Street had put in the rest of the bucks.
Yeah.
But he was anxious to get a manufacturing guy on board right away.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a nice cordial discussion, and I think he listened to my background and
Yeah.
said, okay. So we hopped on a plane and flew to Herkimer, New York in the afternoon. And there I met George Kogar.
Mm-hmm.
George was in his home on about 20 acres of land, or 80 acres of land, I guess, a private airstrip. And he had retired from the ISIS operation. His
Yeah.
wife Ann served he and I lunch, and the other three guys went into town. And George and I talked for almost 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to know what he really thought of this design and this product.
Yeah.
And he wanted to know, did I have the management experience that those guys did not?
Yeah.
And would it be an asset to the company?
Right.
At the end of that conversation, he offered me the job of manufacturing director and founder stock, one of the largest blocks of founder stock. And I went home, flew back to Boston, talked to my wife. She said, how long is this going to take? I said, it's going to be another one of those 5-year deals. But this time it's going to be full time. I'm going to be away a bit.
Yeah.
It's going to take a lot of personal time from the family. She said, well, if you want to try this, let's do it. But 5 years from now, by that time we had 6 children. The youngest was 4. She said, I'm going to need you, be on scene to help raise this family.
Yeah.
I said, you got it. That's what I want to do. So I'm going to take this job. I won't take it for more than 5 years, win or lose. If it
Okay.
wins, I'm out of there. If it's a success, I'm out of there. If it loses, I'm out of there. We'll go do something else.
Okay.
At the same time, Ellen Clutchman told Ken Olson at DEC he was going to leave and join Data General.
Mm.
And Olson was upset, obviously, that the guys had broken away.
Yes, of course.
But he told Clutchman, you're crazy. These guys left without their leader and their manufacturing guy, and they'll never succeed. And Alan knew of my experience at 3Cs,
Mm-hmm.
where we had worked together. And even though Olson offered him a bunch of stock, which DEC didn't do in those days,
Yeah, right.
to stay, Ellen left.
Mm-hmm.
And he came and ran an outstanding
Oh, he was amazing.
advertising, PR, and marketing plan.
He was an amazing person.
Herb Richmond from Fairchild joined the company about in June.
Mm-hmm.
Ellen joined it with me in October.
Okay. I didn't know
And
that.
we hit the deck
Absolutely.
running.
Yeah.
Would this be a good opportunity to get you a glass of water? Just take a quick.
No, I'm fine, thank you.
All right,
Yeah.
good. What about you? Would you like one?
No, I'm fine.
All right.
Thank you.
Just want to make sure.
So I walked into the beauty parlor,
Yeah.
sat down, and wrote a 10-page manufacturing plan outlining the next fiscal year.
Okay.
Actually developed a fiscal calendar ending in September. They didn't agree with that at all. Didn't figure out it was necessary. That's what I'd used at GE and 3C. it was to match the government funding programs.
Okay, yes.
And they never changed it for all the rest of their existence in 30 years.
Yeah, right.
And I mapped out the first year's shipments and capital equipment and facility expansions and everything else. And they were busy doing what they did.
Yeah.
Hendrie was sitting in a closet on a teletypewriter, in touch with a Princeton University computer, doing the software at the same time.
Uh-huh.
Those guys were finishing the logic design and the mechanical design.
Yeah, right. Wow. Okay.
So I also ran personnel and field service at that time.
Okay.
We interviewed
Well, they didn't really have any managers who could do that sort
well,
of thing.
they didn't, but beyond that, they didn't have an understanding of the management concepts that I did, which were very disciplined, the GE discipline structured
Yes.
management principles. Dex was more loose, and part of why DeCastro had left is he and Olson had clashed over that, and it was very obvious that our styles of management were entirely different. But I'll tell you frankly, Gardner, I was attracted by the computer, not the people. And we lived with the management differences. It worked very well because we ended up having a split personality in the company.
Yeah.
I could put together a very rigid, well-oiled manufacturing juggernaut, and they would hire individuals in their development and R&D and let them run on their own. Just hire super smart guys and try and get a new model out as fast as they could.
Yep.
And I developed a technique that nobody had ever seen in the industry before. Most engineering programs, when they got a product, will go from preliminary release to final release after a prototype. I changed that from partial to full release.
Okay.
I would work with the engineers, and we'd start building the bill of materials on the things they had most confidence in right away. And I'd work with them and start ordering those components and getting those ready for production, and hold off on the other stuff until they were finished with the real challenging aspects of their design. And we put together a pilot run that would make like 10 or 20 units. Half of them would stay in the house, the other half would ship. Engineering changes all over the place, but I was with them all the way.
Yeah.
So Sogi and I developed that relationship. And while I was controlling the documentation and the quality of the releases, he was helping with the vertical integration. So we were sharing risks. He helped bring on a printed circuit facility. He helped bring on a semiconductor facility. He
Yes.
helped bring on a core facility. And Dick and I were very close.
Okay. Really? Okay. Yeah, I never got to know Dick.
Very few
all.
people did.
Yeah.
He was a very, very confined person.
Yeah. And he left relatively
Well-
soon after I got there. And
well,
I, of course, had known you.
No, that's exactly
I
right.
know you from
Yeah, well,
3-6. Yeah.
that's
But
correct.
anyway.
Yeah, so before we got you to join us, we were actually putting together quite an operation and setting manufacturing records that the computer industry hadn't seen before. We could bring a prototype into production faster than anybody. We could turn inventories better than DEC or IBM. For example, DEC would turn their inventories 3 times a year, which meant they had 4 months worth of inventory. We turned ours 10 times a year. Very seldom would we have more than a month's worth of inventory. And the reason is I dealt with our vendors, like core memory stringers in Hong Kong,
Yep.
and everybody else, the integrated circuit packages, as just an extension of our product line. And so I wouldn't order 1,000 more than we needed to get a low cost. I would give them 30 days notice on a change in mix, which from our standpoint, we had 1,200 hardware options and
Yeah.
600 software options. Mix was changing all the time.
Yes.
So we could turn the inventories and get the materials in faster and out. Kind of a just-in-time delivery, which I now call it, but we worked that pretty well. And I brought a lot of guys with me from 3Cs.
Okay.
And so we went from 0 to 1 million to 7 million to 15 million to 30 million and 50 million. We were the fastest growing, most profitable computer company in the world. And it was, as advertised, the best small computer in the world.
Yes. Yeah. Basic machine was really,
It
really
was.
clever.
Really was.
Yeah. Well, we have stories from Woz, you know, who designed the, you know, Apple I and the Apple II, that he learned about the Nova, and he had a picture of a Nova on his office wall because he'd gotten a hold of the logic diagrams and realized how incredibly clever a machine was in terms of what it could do with a very few number of parts.
Well, not only that, he would play around reverse engineering it with the newest parts he could get his hands on, just to kind of see if he could redesign the Nova.
Really?
It was his inspiration.
Yeah.
He's been very vocal about that.
Okay.
There's no question that the Nova inspired Apple.
Yeah.
No question.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, one of the things that I had heard that you did in the early days, long before I got to Data General, was that you wanted to really understand what all the different operations were, and so that you would go down and learn about with the various women on the production line, and try to understand what they were doing. Is that a piece of folklore, or did you really do that?
I did it. I was a walking around kind of manager.
Yeah.
When I mentioned that, I brought several people with me from computer control, several of them who had management experience as well, but handling production, handling quality control, some handling materials, manufacturing, engineering, all the aspects of it. And as they came on board, they hit the deck running because they knew what my style was. So we didn't have a learning process to go through.
Yeah.
So I would work with them as they put their operations in place, and that included walking the lines. And I hired many of the women assembly people on the line when I was in early years.
Yeah, when
I personally
you were just
hired.
getting it started.
Exactly. And one of the guys I brought on board was a guy named Larry Donovan, who handled the production. And Larry and his wife Bunny had 12 kids, and he knew how to handle the women assemblers on the line. So Larry was very good at it.
Okay.
So we were rolling along very well.
Okay. Now, who else did you bring on?
John Kiley
Okay.
was in production. A guy named Ed Richards. Several of the supervisors of test engineering were guys I brought on. Dick Mank was a leading technician, and a good crew.
Yeah. Okay. So you took the.
Well, I got called by Honeywell saying, "Hey, you're stealing some of our people," and I said, "Give them better jobs. They want to join me." So.
Yep. Okay. All right.
So we were tooling along very well, and Pat and I were getting close to the 4.5 year mark, and we went to vacation on Cape Cod and Truro. Took it for a week in '72. It extended to 2 weeks, and we enjoyed it so much. And I recently came upon a photo I took. I'm not much of a cameraman, but took a picture of her, and now our 8 children. 2 more of our children were born when I was at DG. And as a matter of fact, talking about the children, we have a press release that Ellen made at DG that showed 6 of our kids working on teletypes on the time-sharing machine for the Nova.
Okay.
And one of those kids came down to this meeting with me today.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
His name. So they knew what the Nova was all about. They knew that the dad they didn't see that often in the first 3 years or so.
Yeah.
Now they're starting to see more of because things were really starting to go.
Yeah.
And the financial gain from the stock options was becoming very evident. So it wasn't a question of walking away after 5 years to something that wasn't working. It was a question of walking away 5 years from something that had been a roaring success.
Mm-hmm. So you were saying you were down at the Cape?
Took the picture, and there down beyond the dunes of Truro was Pat with all 8 kids.
Okay.
And I looked at it and I said, now I recognize the contribution she made in this thing.
Yeah.
I couldn't have done it without her. And now it was time to go back and spend more time with the family.
Okay.
And that's exactly the main reason I left. There were others. The clashes in some management styles were some. Dick Sogi left 2 months before I did,
Mm-hmm.
and I was losing a good partner that had helped make that operation go in terms of the engineering.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, it's time for me to go.
Okay.
So I resigned
Okay.
and retired. I was 40 years old. We moved to Phoenix, Arizona, and I just enjoyed 46 years of retirement.
Now, your stock options, I think, had were they 5-year vesting?
Well, some were, yeah, most of them were, but I had founder stock, which you could do a little bit sooner. But I also had qualified stock, which usually was a 5-year deal. But yeah, the 5-year time frame was also influencing.
It worked. It fitted into
Yeah.
your
Yeah, well,
overall plan.
Exactly. When I told you that given the SEC and the IRS, that's obviously a factor in stock options.
Yes, right. Okay. Now, tell me about how, when you retired, you didn't stay in Massachusetts.
No.
Tell me that story.
Well, we were fortunate enough we could choose where we wanted to live.
Mm-hmm.
We could stay in Massachusetts. We chose 4 other places around the country. St. Petersburg, Florida, the Tempe, St. Petersburg area,
Mm-hmm.
Denver, San Francisco, and Phoenix.
Okay.
Because they all had some sort of development of computers areas being developed in those areas, but mainly they had excellence that we wanted in education for our children.
Okay.
So prep schools that we wanted the kids to go to, Phoenix started out dead last, finished first.
Okay, so you just investigated
Yeah, we
each
did.
one.
Yeah, we did for a period of time and just moved to Phoenix. Didn't know anybody there at all.
Okay. But so was fundamentally was it the school system the most important factor?
I think it was the most important, as it turned out, looking back on it now with all our 8 having been through colleges and doing very well in their careers. It was a good choice for us. We were very pleased with the school system, especially the prep school systems.
Okay. All right, yeah, and they were all really young, so
Yeah.
they had...
And I did some consulting work. I got down there, and Motorola was the only big operation in Phoenix.
Yeah.
Honeywell was there, but they were closing up their computer plant. And so I knew some of the guys who had gone down to the Honeywell plant when they were with GE, and it was a GE plant before Honeywell bought it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to do consulting. I did actually two major consultings that are interesting. I consulted with firms that were startups primarily in Asia, in Korea, in Hong Kong, and Singapore.
Okay.
And I would travel to those locations once a quarter in exchange for compensation from them to get them started in their manufacturing of computers.
Okay.
The other one was, I got a call one day from Hadco Corporation. Hod Irvin was the head of Hadco. Hadco was our sole supplier of the big 15-inch circuit boards that are generally used.
Right.
He was having manufacturing problems big time.
Oh,
He
really?
wanted me to come be on his board of directors, gave me significant stock, and I solved his manufacturing problems after 3 years, and we took the company public, and it was very successful.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I happen to know Hod pretty well.
Well, he's very, very involved with the arts, and
Yes, exactly.
haven't seen him in a long time, but he and I spent a lot of time together in the 1980-84.
Yeah, okay. That was his, that reminds me, how did you, tell me the story of how you ended up with Hod Irving, with Hadco, as the sole supplier of your printed circuit boards.
Actually, Sogi picked them.
Okay.
Sogi was a designer of the 15-inch circuit board,
Yeah.
and they had a prototype shop in Massachusetts, Hadco,
Okay.
and they were the only ones who could really make it happen.
Okay. So he
And so-
gave the design to to multiple people, and
Well, they needed a lot of hand-holding. They were having a lot of problems making the board,
mm-hmm.
but I was able to do that with them. Dick and I worked together with them, and so they grew with us.
Okay.
And it wasn't until we started to do the vertical integration and manufacture our own circuit boards that we let them go because they were very key for the first 3 years, 3.5 years,
Okay.
almost 4.
They were the people who could make that
They
large
were
board
almost the sole supplier, yes,
with
of the big
the,
board. Yep.
with the line width tolerances.
Line width tolerances, double plated through everything, something that could be gone over a wave and not die, and it was pretty good.
Okay. All right. That's very cool. Did you tell me about a little bit about some of the issues? Talk a little bit more about the management style issues with the deck educated founders.
It's never good to disparage the dead. Several of the individuals have deceased.
Certainly. Yeah.
It just suffices to say we had very significant management differences. Not early on, because we'd only meet in the hallway and say what's going on. We never had, in all the years I was at Data General, we never had one board of directors. We had a board of directors meeting, but we never had one management meeting. The 5 of us never got together and sat around a table and met and talked about the future.
Really?
We'd go to the local fast food joint and talk about how much money each one needed and say, okay, let's get it done. But it was always on the fly. They were doing their thing, I was doing my thing. So what really made us very good in the beginning tore us apart towards the end.
Okay.
Big disputes on style, philosophies, how to treat people. And so I told you the main reasons I left were my 5-year window and the family,
right.
and that is true. But it was also impacted by the fact it was time to go because we were just having too many arguments. And one of them was the direction that now we should take after 5 years. I thought we should take the direction towards a smaller computer because we had the best small computer in the world, and the semiconductor guys were starting to head our way with smaller stuff. They agreed. So I told them the best guy you can hire is Gardner Hendrie, and bring him in and design a microchip
Okay.
to head towards a small computer. And they said they didn't really know you that well, but I knew you very well.
Yeah.
And so, as you mentioned, we hired you, and about 6 months before I left, unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to spend a lot of time on that project.
Right.
The other direction, obviously, was go for a bigger machine. And DEC was starting to get their act together on their 16-bit units and starting to go 32 bits.
Right.
And Burkhardt and DeCastro wanted to go for the 32-bit machine and compete against IBM. I didn't have a strong feeling in that direction at all, one way or the other, or really go with the small computer one way or the other. And if it had one, it wouldn't have changed my decision.
Yeah.
I was still ready.
I understand.
I was still ready to leave.
Okay.
So the last time I saw you, you were over a drawing board in a cubicle designing the Micronova. And I followed it, and we had just done 50 million in sales. We had almost 50 million in cash in the bank. We could have gone after either market we wanted to.
Yeah.
We left the door wide open for the smaller computer guys to jump in, which they did
Absolutely.
within 2 years.
Exactly.
And I followed the larger computer activities, but the soul of the new machine told me exactly what I expected would happen. It was not as much a definitive strategy as it was a competition to go get something against DEC.
Yes.
And part of the reasoning that everybody had was Ken Olsen had said publicly, I can't see any reason why anybody would ever want a computer in their home. And DeCastro and Burkhardt agreed with him.
Yep. Exactly.
About 25 years later, they regretted that, said that we missed the mark.
Yep.
And
They did.
yeah, they did.
they absolutely did. And, you know, Ken Olson, yeah, Ken Olson totally missed the mark too. I mean,
Yeah.
he, you know, deck went down trying to build a machine to compete with IBM mainframes. It's really sort of sad.
And they both went out of business at almost the same time, within
Yeah.
a year.
Exactly, yeah.
I think both of them, both DeCastro and Olson, have said that they missed that call. But it was, you know, it was easy to miss it. From my viewpoint, one of the weaknesses we had to making the smaller computer call, it wasn't because we didn't have the resources. We certainly had the design and the manufacturing to do
Yeah.
it. We didn't have the marketing will. We didn't have the marketing will.
Mm-hmm.
And Richmond was a good salesman, but he was a salesman to sell in the OEM market. He didn't understand that small computer market.
Yes. Right. And his background came from, you know, selling semiconductors.
Exactly.
Which is the
Yeah.
OEM, which is fundamentally
Yeah,
an
he was
OEM
good.
market.
He was very good at it.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
So that's the management, answer to your management conflicts that took place.
Okay.
It wasn't a big, huge thing, but we've never spoke to each other since.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, they've never mentioned to me that Pat Green was the leader and manufacturing guy, that he and his wife decided it wasn't worth the risk to go.
Okay. I knew that Pat Green was originally part of the team, and then he bowed out, but I had never heard that it was, you know, it was sort of, that there was a family decision
It was.
piece of it.
Yeah, it certainly was. Yeah, they left when he was in Japan, but that was partly a family decision, I think. After they left, he gave their business plan to Olson. He showed it to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually had some stock in DG. He got
Mhm.
it was just a little share of stock. So that's how I became, you know, knowledgeable of his continuing relationship with them. But
Yeah, but he just, yeah, too risky.
yeah,
Okay.
so it turns out that family matters made decisions for both somebody who didn't want to join them when he thought he could, and somebody who left when I thought I could. You know, our oldest was just starting high school when we left, and
Okay.
you don't know whether you have enough money to live on and educate all those children, but you know, it worked.
Well, you have a good guess that, you know, because you started out, I mean, you got a reasonable nest egg when you left.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
certainly did.
That's well managed. That can go a long, long,
Yes,
long,
yes.
long.
Yeah, well, 1973 when I left was, you know, the largest recession in the United States since the Great Depression. So it came out at a time when the economy wasn't looking all that great.
Yeah.
But, you know, we've gone through ups and downs with that sort of thing, so.
Yeah. Okay. Did you, you know, after you left, a little curious, not sure whether it needs to be, you know, the computer museum's interested, but did you manage your own money, or did you find individuals or firms to do that for you?
I managed my own. I had a good broker, obviously, and a good lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
and other advisors, but no, I managed my portfolio myself.
I would have sort of suspected that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. Tell me what advice you would give to, kids who've, found that, they like science, they like engineering, that, their minds are, work that way. And maybe they have a little bit, maybe they do, maybe they don't have any sort of entrepreneurial rumblings in their heads. What would your advice be in terms of a career direction or principles that maybe they ought to use to figure out how to have a successful life?
That's a tough one, Gardner. I think it varies with every child.
Okay.
I think looking at our 8 children, each has been motivated in their directions, their career directions for different reasons. My responsibility and my wife's responsibility is to make those open for them so they can make the decisions, give them a foundation with good education. And for those who are thinking of going into a technical field, I would give them the same advice I described for you. Stay in the mainstream, don't get too far off the path. Give yourself an opportunity to look at 5-year segments after a certain period of time where you've gained experience. And if you think that you can make a contribution by forming your own company or joining a company with other qualified people who you respect, then do it and take the risk. The risk is worth the reward.
Okay.
And the reward is worth the risk.
Yes. Okay. Good. What areas haven't I covered that you'd like to maybe talk about a little bit?
I'll just finish up with, how do you spend 45 years in retirement, raising a family, and just doing some consulting for a period of like 10 years. I haven't done any consulting in 30 years. But I did give a chance to give back to the community, which I think is very helpful, not only to the family, but to the community. And so I got involved with the university in Phoenix, advisory boards. I got involved with the banks, convincing them to loan money to technology startups, helped influence the decision to bring Intel into Phoenix. Got involved with the education facilities, obviously, the schools that our kids went to, got involved with hospitals. And in 1987, just 31 years ago, I was asked to lead the group that brought Pope John Paul II to Phoenix on a visit.
Wow.
Spent 2 years of my life doing that with the bishops of the Catholic Church and the Secret Service and the community that I put together, people organized in Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
10,000 volunteers. Had a wonderful experience.
Wow.
And that's something I look back on saying, I'm glad I had the opportunity to do that.
Yes.
To meet with the Pope not only when he was in Phoenix on several occasions, but he asked Pat and I to join him in Detroit on his way back to Rome, and
Really?
had sat in a room like this and talked to him for a while. And he's now a saint. And one of the things I mentioned to Ron Gruner, who flew me up here today, was if you've touched a saint, you may be a relic yourself. So shake hands with a relic.
I like that. I like that. All right. That's very good. Yeah. So you never retired not doing any of it.
True.
Yes.
That's true.
Yes.
With 8 kids, it's never dull.
You're right.
But yes, I had an opportunity to keep a hand in, which is
With
one of the reasons we
various-
chose it. Yes, it was helpful too.
Yeah.
Keep up with the technology. I actually had one of the first home computers in Arizona. I put it together with a MITS 8-bit machine.
You did?
Hobby ship, yeah. Got to some guys from Motorola who were on layoff at the time and did the interior work. And all I needed then was to get BASIC into the machine. Went looking at how to do that with a marketing friend of mine and talked to 2 guys in Sunnyvale, 2 software guys. I said, yeah, we can do it, but it'll cost you $25,000 up front. And when I was sitting on that decision, I wasn't sure I wanted to do that. And this was 1976 or something
Yeah.
like that. A couple of dropouts in neighboring states, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where MITS was. Convinced Gates and Allen to do BASIC on their machine. And that's exactly what I was looking for. And then, as you mentioned, Wozniak and Jobs developed their situation up in California.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay. So I went out and bought one of theirs, and that was it.
Yeah. Didn't need to spend $25,000, did you?
You're right. Exactly.
Okay. Well, that's very cool. All right. Well, I want to thank you so much, Harvey, for taking the opportunity to be willing to do this. and do an oral history for the Computer History Museum.
I'm
It's
glad.
been a delightful conversation.
It's been delightful to me too, and it's just wonderful to see you again after all these years.
Yeah.